Hi guys, good evening everyone. I welcome you on to another session of RBI 247. Just let me know if everything is fine and then we will start. मैं एक बार चैट खोल लेता हूँ अपने फ़ोन में भी. चलिए, just give me a thumbs up. आज का first question और first information after which we will start with the actual RBI 247 sessions is fiscal deficits of the government of India. तो फिजिकल डेफिसिट क्या है? दैट इज द फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन फॉर यू. एंड इफ यू डोंट नो येट, this is the right time to start asking such questions and start finding the solutions to these questions. For 2024 financial year, now when we say financial year 2024, we mean the year between 2023 and 2024. For this, the fiscal deficit of the government of India, the projection is, because 2023 is still going on, projection kitna hai? 17.86 trillion. This is something that you should remember. Now, this is going to be 5.9% of nominal gross GDP. What is the difference between nominal and real? That is another question. This is how you can learn more and more, by asking yourself these basic questions. And what is the target? The target is to achieve fiscal deficit below 4.5% by financial year 2026. This is something that's very relevant for you, both for factual acing the examination factually, and also for your own understanding as to what is deficit, what is fiscal deficit, what are the other kinds of deficit, what is nominal GDP, what is real GDP, why is the fiscal deficit so high, what are the targets for the next 2 to 3 years. ठीक है ना? This is what we start with. I will be coming back to fiscal deficits and the targets of government of India again very soon. But in the meantime, let's start from the very beginning. Okay. Now, what exactly are we going to cover? Are we going to start our day with? Number one, government borrowing program for financial year 23 and 24. Government का जो borrowing program है वो क्या कहता है? There have been some updates there, and there have been some changes in the way government wants to borrow. अब government borrow तो कर रही है. From where does it want to borrow? From where is it borrowing? That is also an important question that is raised, जो कि आंसर होना चाहिए. This is where the government has made some changes. Government has finalized its borrowing program. Second tranche में, for the second half of the year, 6.55 trillion rupees we will be borrowing. This is approximately 42% of the total borrowings of 15.43 trillion. That is our target for financial year 23. Please remember this. 15.43 trillion is the target for financial year 23. The one that we discussed just before this is the target for 24. For 24, the government plans to borrow. This is incorrect here. ये 15.43 नहीं होगा. This is the other number. Through 20,000 crore issuance of sovereign green bonds. Now, this is where it gets interesting. We've just understood that the government wants to borrow. The total borrowing is going to be 15.43 trillion in this financial year, out of which we are going to borrow 42% now. How are we going to borrow that? That is important to remember. So we are going to borrow through auctions. What are we going to auction? We are going to auction government securities. What are government securities? These are bonds or debentures that the government issues through RBI, through which they borrow money either from banks or directly from the people. When they borrow directly from the people, and now they can do that, it is called as RBI Retail Direct. If you just Google RBI Retail Direct, you will be sent to a website, and on this website, you as an individual also can buy government securities. So the government plans to borrow a total of 15.43 trillion this year, out of which some money will be borrowed through government security issues. How are they going to be issued? That is another important area that you should be clear about. अलग अलग maturities के bonds सरकार issue करती है. The government can issue bonds of different maturities. 3-year maturity, which means that the government issues a bond today to the people or to the banks, whoever wants to buy that. Let's say I buy this bond, and the government says on that bond that you will be paid an interest rate of, let's say, 8% per annum, compounded annually, and I will redeem your bond after 3 years, which means I will get my money back after 3 years, plus I will also keep getting an interest rate of 8% every year. That is what this means, a redemption period or a maturity period of 3 years. If you see here closely, you will figure out that the government is now borrowing heavily long-term securities. By issuing long-term securities, they are borrowing heavily. So out of the total borrowing that they're going to do from the market by issuing government securities, almost 23% are going to come from issue of 10-year securities, and almost 18% are going to come from issue of 40-year securities, which means the government is issuing long-term securities more now. Why is the government issuing long-term securities? What are the advantages of issuing long-term securities, and what are the advantages of issuing short-term securities like 3 years, 5 years? Let's try and understand that as well. That holds a lot of importance for us. Okay, I hope this is clear. फाइनेंशियल ईयर 24 का टारगेट मैंने आपको बताया था 17.86 ट्रिलियन. फॉर 23 इट इज 15.43 ट्रिलियन. नाउ दीज आर द numbers, but they can be asked in the examination, so you should try and remember that. They also keep changing, so keep a tab on these numbers regularly. Okay, advantages of issuing long term government securities. क्या क्या major advantages होते हैं when we issue long term securities? Number one, large long term investments. Let's say I borrow for 40 years, which means I have to pay back only after 40 years. For the next 40 years, I will keep paying interest rate. So I have to pay back the entire sum of the principal only after 40 years, which means I have a lot of time in my hands. I can dedicate these funds for something that might give me returns after 10 years, 20 years, even 30 years. It will do. What is it called? This is called asset liability management. Asset liability management. You want to manage assets and liabilities tenure. So the assets, liabilities क्या है? Liabilities वो हैं जो आपने borrow किया है, because I have to pay it back. Asset is what you have lent, because you will receive it back. Okay. So what I have borrowed? I have borrowed some money, let's say 100 rupees for the next 40 years. This is my borrowing. This is my liability. What do I do with this money? I invest this money, let's say, to create a highway. मैंने बोला 100 रुपए का ये highway बनाते हैं. So I've created an asset, but this highway is going to take another 10 years. I know that. Therefore, my borrowing should also be for 10 years or 12 years or something closer to 10 years. Then I will be managing my assets and liabilities well. This is where the government can have more flexibility if there are more long-term borrowings that the government is making. Automatically, it also might mean that the government has the flexibility to invest those borrowings in long-term investments. Issuing long-term government securities allows the government to finance large long-term investments like highways, ports, airports, airways. These kind of things, spending on defense, manufacturing, these kind of things are possible only if you have borrowings of long-term nature. If you have borrowings which are short-term, you have to give it back in the next 3 years, then it won't be possible. What is the second advantage? This is more technical in nature. Sounds more technical, but actually it is not. It says reduced rollover risk. What is the meaning of rollover risk? Okay, यहाँ से मुझे याद आया, I was taking a class on UPSC, I believe yesterday, and I asked the question, and majority of the UPSC aspirants could not answer that question. Can you answer this question to me? What is the difference between, very simple question, then you know that you're smarter than UPSC aspirants out there, financial inclusion and financialization. Can anyone answer this question? What is the difference between financial inclusion and financialization of an economy? Right now, interviews are going on, mock interviews of RBI. And this was one question which popped up in my mock interviews. And this is something that very few people have been able to answer. Let's see if somebody can answer this. Then we'll come to rollover risk. Another important concept that you should be aware about, rollover risk. It reduces when you issue long-term securities. How does it reduce? And what exactly is this rollover risk? We should be talking about that. We should know that. Can anyone tell me in the chat box out there? Google करके ही बता दो. I might have a false, assumption of my students being smarter than UPSC aspirants out there. Aishwarya says financial inclusion means making financial service available to the last person in queue. Correct. Very generic yet correct definition of financial inclusion. What is financialization of an economy? Bharat says providing affordable financial services, whereas financialization is strengthening financial system. Yes, very, very close, almost there. Financialization of an economy is increasing the usage of financial products and services wherever they can be used. Financial inclusion is not the same, or it's not limited to the same. Financialization means making sure that everybody is using the financial services and products that are available out there. That would increase financialization in an economy. But financial inclusion means providing access to financial services and financial products to every person, every citizen, every resident in the economy. So financialization of an economy looks very overlapping, but it is not exactly the same. Okay. Wonderful. You were able to get close to the answer. Financial inclusion means, Shark says, providing financial service to last people. Financialization means financializing the financial services more effectively. Yes, wonderful. That is very, very close. Financializing the financial services. वापस आते हैं. Let's come back. Rollover risk. First, we try and understand what is rollover risk. Then we will move towards how large or long-term government securities reduce rollover risk. So let's say you borrowed for 3 years, but you've invested this money in such a way that you will get the return only after 10 years. So you know that you will have to borrow again after these 3 years for, let's say, another 3 years and then another 4 years. You know that you will have to do this, right? आपको ये करना पड़ेगा because you're borrowing in short term, whereas you've invested this money for the long term. आपने invest जो किया है वो long term में कर दिया है. What will happen? Let's say you borrowed this at 8% per annum compounded annually. After 3 years, you somehow have to give this money back and raise the money again. What will you do? You will, whatever money you get through this, you will try and return, and you will raise the money again after 3 years. Now, when you go back to the market and try and raise the money, you might be able to get it at a higher rate of interest. Why? Because the risk associated with giving the money to you has increased for the people out there, because they know that you've invested in something more risky, something which is going to give you a return after 10 years, 15 years. So they don't know if you will default or if you will be able to pay back the money. So they will say 8% is not enough. We want more, 9%. You go back to the market again after 3 years, they say this time it's going to be 10%. This is rollover risk. You have to roll over, you have to keep, applying for more and more borrowings. You have to keep issuing more government securities again and again and again. And the risk associated with them increases in the eyes of the people or the lender, and therefore the interest rates keeps increasing. Let's see what it says here. Long-term finance helps reduce the risk of issuing new bonds at higher interest rates after the redemption of previous bonds. पिछले के रिडेम्पशन के बाद हम जब फिर से इशू करने जाते हैं, देन द risk increases in the eyes of the investor, automatically rate of interest increases. This is reduced if you just issue it once for 10 years. आपने 10 साल का सीधा लॉन्ग टर्म बॉन्ड इशू किया at 8% and you're also investing this money in an investment which is going to complete in the next 10 years. So asset liability management automatically reduces rollover risk. Okay. Third, risk shifting. Long-term finance shifts risks to the provider of funds. अब क्या करता है long-term finance जो है, now this is long-term and this is short-term. Long-term में you are borrowing money. The government is borrowing money when it is issuing government securities. So you are borrowing money for 40 years. Nobody knows if the government will exist after 40 years or not. You don't know, I don't know. We also won't exist after 40 years. That is my assumption. So we might not exist tomorrow also, but 40 साल के बाद तो बहुत ही मुश्किल है. So long term, 40 years, the government has borrowed money. Nobody knows, which means the risk of putting your money in this kind of a government security is risky for the lender or investor. It is more risky for the investor. So the risk is more for the borrower. But the risk shifts towards the lender as soon as we move towards long-term borrowing. This is what is mentioned here. You're able to shift the risk from the borrower towards the investor as they bear the fluctuations in default probability and potential loss due to default along with a change in market conditions. Okay, long term में बहुत सारे fluctuations हो सकते हैं, and with those fluctuations the risk also increases. These are the advantages of issuing long term government securities. On the other hand, what are the advantages of issuing short term government securities? ये भी हमें पता होना चाहिए. Number 1, flexibility for short term investments. जो भी short term के investments हैं उसमें हमें flexibility मिलती है. They are beneficial when funds are required in shorter investments that match the maturity of assets and liabilities. Similar to long term, if you are thinking of investing in short term investments, then you should borrow from people saying that I'm going to give you the money back after 3 years only, after 5 years only. तो शॉर्ट टर्म इन्वेस्टमेंट्स अगर आप करना चाहते हो तो वहां पे आपको फ्लेक्सिबिलिटी मिलती. इट्स अ कॉस्ट इफेक्टिव ऑप्शन. इफ आई हैव टू शो यू द ग्राफ, तो किस तरह से आपका ग्राफ दिखेगा लॉन्ग टर्म वर्सेस शॉर्ट टर्म. लेट्स से आई वांट टू मेक द ग्राफ हियर. ठीक है. नाउ दिस इज टाइम t and this is rate of interest. A short term, long term return line will look something like this, whereas in the short run, if I am issuing short term securities, then it is going to look something like this. It's going to be say straight horizontal to the x-axis, but the one which is for long run will look something like this. So when the security is issued, the risk is higher because I'm going to get my money back after 40 years, let's say. Therefore, the required rate of return of the investor will also be higher. As I approach my redemption period, automatically the risk is reducing and the required rate of return is also reducing. So what have we understood from that? Short-term borrowings are cheaper. Let's say I go to you and I say, can you lend me money for 3 years? You will say, okay, fine, but I want 10%. Let's say I come to you and I say, can you give me money for 40 years? You will say, okay, but I want 20% per annum because the risk is very high. I don't know whether you're going to pay me back or not. I don't know whether you will continue to pay me back for 40 years or not. There are too many ifs and buts involved. So I'm going to charge a lot more. So short-term borrowing is cheaper. Okay. Default risk is also reduced automatically. Your situation, my situation might remain the same for the next 3 years, but it might change drastically in the next 40 years. Therefore, the default risk is much higher in long-term borrowings. In short-term borrowings, the default risk from the side of the borrower is much lesser. I hope this is clear. यहाँ तक clear है, ठीक है? So this was about this particular news item. हमने news से concept निकाला है. News क्या थी? That the government has decided to continue its borrowing for financial year 23. It has certain fiscal deficit targets, and this time it is going to issue a lot of short-term as well as long-term government securities in order to borrow. So we had a look at the advantages of long-term borrowing, the disadvantages, the advantages of short-term borrowing also. Okay. Now, do you want me to take something very, very difficult but very important, or do you want me to take something very simple yet less important? Just let me know in the comment section, in the chat box, and I will pick that up. I have created something very difficult but very, very relevant for your RBI examination, and I also have created something simpler but less relevant for your examination. You will have to be attention, in your senses with me for the next 20 minutes if you want me to pick up something difficult. It's going to be time consuming, it's going to be difficult, and at the same time it's going to require a lot of attention. Chaliye उठाते हैं. Wonderful. I like the energy there. Yes. So this is what we have. The title or the core of the news is monetary penalty on banks for non-compliance. So some banks were unable to comply with the directions issued by RBI. We will very shortly have a look at what directions, because of which RBI has penalized these banks. So RBI decided to impose penalties on banks for non-compliance with certain regulations. What is the difference between regulation and supervision? Can someone tell me? For this one, they have imposed penalty for what? For failure to comply with regulations. But there is some difference between regulation and supervision, because all of you are new students preparing for 24 RBI, probably for the first time. This is a very basic question that you should be aware about. Can anyone type and tell me the difference between regulation and supervision? Very basic question that popped up in my head. Keep answering in the chat box. Let me move forward. In the meantime, let me get to the topic. Supervision is essentially monitoring the rules, compliance, wonderful Kaushal. Regulation are making rules and supervision is making sure it is implemented. Wonderful Archana. Jay Prakash, regulation or guidelines, supervision is they are being followed or not. Wonderful again. Nice one. Nice one. You're aware about this. That is what I wanted to see. So you're going in the right direction. Nothing wrong there. Now the first bank that has been penalized is State Bank of India, a penalty of 1.30 crores. The fact is not very important. It's just for your understanding and getting to know the topic better. That's the entire idea. So what all compliances has SBI not followed, because of which RBI has penalized? That is important. Let's get into that. Number one, loans and advances. Loans and advances मतलब जो भी loan देता है बैंक. Statutory and other restrictions. This is the name of one compliance, one regulation that has been created by RBI, and the banks are required to comply with this regulation. SBI was not able to probably comply with it perfectly. They must have made some mistake. We are not aware about that. We don't want to know that, because of which they've been penalized. The second one, management of intra-group transactions. Management of intra-group transactions. That is the second one. You don't have to mug it up. आपको याद नहीं करना है ये, ठीक है ना? I'm just telling you. Again, what has happened now? Let me give you the news, then we'll come to the important part. Indian Bank has been penalized 1.62 crore. उन्होंने क्या comply नहीं किया? Number one, again same, loans and advances, statutory and other restrictions comply नहीं किया. Second, know your customer KYC गाइडलाइंस में कुछ कंप्लायंस में इशू था। नंबर 3 इंटरेस्ट रेट ऑन डिपॉजिट्स डायरेक्शंस में कुछ इशू था। दीज वर द 3 कंप्लायंसेस। नंबर 3 पंजाब एंड सिंध बैंक पेनल्टी 1 करोड़। डिपॉजिटर एजुकेशन एंड अवेयरनेस फंड स्कीम 2014, इसमें कुछ कंप्लायंस उन्होंने नहीं किया था, बिकॉज ऑफ विच दिस बैंक ऑल्सो हैज बीन पेनलाइज्ड। ये तो हमें समझ आ गया। अगर हम वापस जाएं तो क्या कौन कौन से बचे? डिपॉजिटर एजुकेशन एंड अवेयरनेस फंड स्कीम नंबर 1, नंबर 2 KYC गाइडलाइंस, नंबर 3 इंटरेस्ट रेट ऑन डिपॉजिट्स गाइडलाइंस, नंबर 4 लोन्स एंड एडवांसेस स्टैट्यूटरी एंड अदर रेस्ट्रिक्शंस। अब ये बहुत लंबी लंबी रिपोर्ट्स हैं। दीज आर रेगुलेशंस व्हिच आर ह्यूज, ह्यूमंगस। 80 पेज, 90 पेज, 100 पेज की एक रेगुलेशन होती है। तो मैं क्या करता हूं, आई कीप क्रिएटिंग अ लिस्ट ऑफ ऑल दीज इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग्स दैट आई फाइंड on RBI website as well as in newspapers, and then we start covering them one by one. Today I'm going to cover and I'm going to teach you only the first one, which is going to take some time, but it is very relevant. Which is that guideline or that compliance, loans and advances, statutory and other restrictions. इसको हम आज कवर करेंगे डिटेल में और इसी पे सारी एनर्जी लगाएंगे। नेक्स्ट टाइम प्रोबेबली विल पिक अप KYC गाइडलाइन और सम अदर गाइडलाइन, और एक एक करके हम सारी कवर करते हुए चले जाएंगे। ठीक है ना? स्टार्ट करें। शुड वी स्टार्ट? गिव मी अ थम्स अप। लोन्स एंड एडवांसेस, स्टैट्यूटरी एंड अदर रेस्ट्रिक्शंस, इसमें बहुत सारी अलग अलग टाइप की उन्होंने कंडीशंस दी हैं। व्हेन कैन अ बैंक नॉट गिव अ लोन, व्हेन एंड वेयर, टू हु कैन अ बैंक नॉट गिव अ लोन. A bank cannot grant any loans and advances on the security of its own shares. अपने ही शेयर्स के सिक्योरिटी पे एडवांसेस नहीं दे सकता। विजय माल्या goes to the bank and says, I want a loan of 100 crore. The bank says, okay, what is the collateral? Vijay Mallya says, I am the owner of Kingfisher. These are the shares of Kingfisher. I am putting these shares as collateral in return for a loan of 100 crore. The bank has to deny it because as per compliance requirements of RBI, a bank cannot provide loan on the security of its own shares. अपने ही शेयर्स के रिटर्न में नहीं दे सकता है वो लोन। दिस ऑल्सो मीन्स कि बैंक के खुद के शेयर्स के सिक्योरिटी पे भी लोन नहीं दे सकता। दोनों चीजें यहाँ पे मैच होती हैं, कहीं ना कहीं दोनों चीजें आपको मिलेंगी। मैं SBI में लोन लेने गया, मैंने बोला आई नीड अ लोन ऑफ 100 करोड़। SBI सेज व्हाट इज द कोलेटरल? आई से हियर आर द शेयर्स ऑफ SBI वर्थ 100 करोड़. SBI कैन नॉट यूज देम एज कोलेटरल और सिक्योरिटी एंड प्रोवाइड मी द लोन. ओके, आई होप दिस इज क्लियर. ऐसी बहुत सारी आपके सामने अभी आने वाली हैं, एक एक करके विल पिक देम अप एंड डाइसेक्ट देम वन बाय वन. Second one, restrictions on loans and advances to the directors and firms in which they hold substantial interest. Now we are going to get into the depth of this. A bank, मैं short में बता देता हूँ, cannot give loan to the director, to the family of the director, to the relatives of the director, to any company where the director is involved, to any company or any institution where the family is involved, where the relatives are involved. Okay, तो बैंक इन सब में नहीं दे सकता है. To any subsidiary where a subsidiary of this company where the director is involved or where the family of the director is involved or the relatives of the director are involved. कोई भी subsidiary, holding, company, trust, anything where director has substantial interest or director has borrowed some money from somewhere, then also the bank cannot forward a loan to the director and any firm related with that director. Okay, this is clear, very, very relevant. Number 3, banks are prohibited from entering into any commitment for granting any loan or advance on behalf of any of the directors or any firm in which any of the directors is interested as partner man. कोई भी एक कंपनी है जहां पे डायरेक्टर is a partner or has some stake as a partner, as a manager, as an employee or as a guarantor, तो वहां पर भी बैंक लोन नहीं दे सकता है. Okay, I hope this is clear. Prohibited to grant loan to any company, subsidiary or holding where its director is a director. कोई भी ऐसी कंपनी, कोई भी ऐसी सब्सिडियरी, कोई भी ऐसी होल्डिंग where the director of the bank is a director, which means he or she has substantial interest और बिजनेस विद दैट कंपनी, दैट सब्सिडियरी और दैट होल्डिंग। तो जो मैंने फर्स्ट आपका चार्ट बनाया था, दैट होल्ड्स ट्रू फॉर ऑल दीज थ्री। अभी फैमिली भी आएगी, अभी रिलेटिव्स भी आएंगे, अभी कंपनी ऑलरेडी आ चुका है, सब्सिडियरी आ चुका है, होल्डिंग आ चुका है। सो इफ द डायरेक्टर इज एनी हाउ रिलेटेड with any of these entities, automatically he cannot be given loan by that bank जहां पे वो डायरेक्टर है, ठीक है ना। restrictions on holding shares in companies, a bank is not allowed to hold shares in any other company more than 30% of the paid up share capital of that company। कोई भी एक कंपनी है, उसमें 30% से ज्यादा इन्वेस्टमेंट किसी भी बैंक का नहीं हो सकता है। वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट टू रिमेंबर। Banks should not hold shares in any company in the management of which the managing director or manager of the bank is interested। कोई भी managing director, manager, director has an interest in a company। Now this is the bank, this is that other company। यहाँ पे डायरेक्टर का इंटरेस्ट है, मैनेजिंग डायरेक्टर का इंटरेस्ट है, कोई मेजर की पर्सनल का इंटरेस्ट है। द बैंक कैन नॉट होल्ड शेयर्स ऑफ दिस कंपनी। If the bank is holding shares, what does it mean? It automatically means the bank is invested in that company, which means there must be an undue influence of this director on the bank, because of which the bank had to buy the shares of this company। So this is also prohibited। yahan tak clear hai? Please let me know, then we'll move forward। Director means director of the bank। मैनेजिंग डायरेक्टर, बोर्ड ऑफ डायरेक्टर्स में जो भी बंदे बैठे होते हैं, ऑल ऑफ दोज, इंडिपेंडेंट डायरेक्टर्स भी आएंगे, सारे डायरेक्टर्स आएंगे। रेस्ट्रिक्शंस ऑन क्रेडिट टू कंपनीज फॉर बायबैक ऑफ सिक्योरिटीज। द बैंक ऑल्सो, देयर आर रेस्ट्रिक्शंस ऑन व्हेन कैन इट गिव क्रेडिट टू अ कंपनी, नॉट इन्वेस्टिंग बट क्रेडिट टू अ कंपनी फॉर बायबैक ऑफ देयर सिक्योरिटीज। बैंक शुड नॉट प्रोवाइड लोन्स टू कंपनीज फॉर बायबैक ऑफ शेयर्स और सिक्योरिटीज। If this is a company and it wants to buy back its shares from the market, then only certain reserves can be used by the company। The bank cannot give loan to the company to enable it to buy back its shares। It is disallowed, not allowed। I hope this is clear। Okay। पिछले सेशन के सारे PDFs ऑलरेडी टेलीग्राम चैनल पे डाल दिए हैं। यू कैन हैव अ लुक एट दोज PDFs। ये भी सेशन खत्म हो जाएगा, कल सुबह तक सारे PDFs आपको टेलीग्राम चैनल पे मिल जाएंगे। यू कैन डाउनलोड देम फ्रॉम देयर और वहां से पढ़ सकते हो। ओके। ग्रांटिंग लोन्स एंड एडवांसेस टू रिलेटिव्स ऑफ डायरेक्टर्स। मैं आपको रिलेटिव्स का ऑलरेडी बता चुका हूं, अभी बस रिवीजन हो जाएगा। ये सारा देखो, इतना सारा कुछ लंबा चौड़ा लिखा हुआ है। व्हेन यू लुक एट द एक्चुअल PDF, वो तो बहुत ही लंबी है, मैंने उसको कंप्रेस करके इतना किया है और आपको समझाते टाइम एक लाइन में समझा दिया। विदाउट प्रायर अप्रूवल ऑफ द बोर्ड, no loans and advances should be granted to the relatives of the bank's chairman or managing director or any other director, or even to directors of other banks or their relatives। not only the director of the bank, ये बैंक है, ये इसका डायरेक्टर है, ये इसके relatives हैं। the bank cannot give loans and advances to these relatives without approval of the entire board। but if there is, let's say, another bank, another director, तो ये वाला बैंक कैन ऑल्सो नॉट गिव लोन टू द रिलेटिव्स ऑफ दीज डायरेक्टर्स विदाउट अप्रूवल ऑफ द बोर्ड। क्यों? क्योंकि ये डायरेक्टर्स कनेक्टेड होंगे, so there might be some kind of influence। okay। Directors of subsidiaries, trustees, venture capital funds set up by the financing banks or other banks। कोई बैंक है, कोई ट्रस्ट, कोई ट्रस्टी है, कहीं पे किसी सब्सिडियरी में डायरेक्टर है, वो सब इसके अंदर आ जाते हैं। ओके। बैंक शुड नॉट ग्रांट लोन्स एंड एडवांसेस एग्रीगेटिंग ₹25 लाख एंड अबव टू। अब यहाँ पे देखो लिमिटेड, अभी तक जो हमने पढ़ा वहां पे तो आउटराइटली दे वर सेइंग यू कैन नॉट गिव अ लोन टू दीज एंटिटीज, टू दीज पीपल, टू दीज रिलेटिव्स एंड फ्रेंड्स एंड whatever ऑफ द डायरेक्टर। बट यहाँ पे अब बोल रहा है unless sanctioned by the board of directors, banks cannot grant loans and advances aggregating 25 lakhs and above। 25 लाख से अगर ऊपर देना है तो अप्रूवल चाहिए बाय द बोर्ड ऑफ डायरेक्टर्स। इफ यू वांट टू गिव लोन टू अ डायरेक्टर इंक्लूडिंग द चेयरमैन और मैनेजिंग डायरेक्टर ऑफ अदर बैंक्स, अगर किसी और बैंक के डायरेक्टर को लोन देना है, देन इफ यू वांट टू गिव अ लोन ऑफ मोर देन 25 लाख, देन यू हैव टू गेट द परमिशन ऑफ द बोर्ड। मैं एक बैंक हूं, मेरे डायरेक्टर को बोर्ड लोन नहीं देना है, देयर इज अनदर बैंक, बैंक 2, आई एम बैंक 1, यहाँ पे मेरा डायरेक्टर है, दिस बैंक 1 वांट्स टू गिव अ लोन टू दिस डायरेक्टर, he can do it up to 25 lakh without any problem. If you want to give it more than 25 lakh, then you have to get approval of the board of directors of this bank, bank 1. Okay. Any firm in which any of the directors of other banks is interested as a partner. इस डायरेक्टर की एक फर्म है, कंपनी है, ओके, एंड दिस बैंक wants to give loan to this firm where another company's, another bank's director is already a partner. Then also you can give it up to 25 lakh. If you want to give more, then you have to get the permission of your own board of directors. Clear है यहाँ तक? I hope this is clear. Okay. भाई ये सारे reasons क्यों हैं? ये सारे reasons बहुत simple हैं. There will be undue influence of directors on how the banks function. What is the best example? The best example is ICICI potential scam, because the case is still going on, where Chanda Kochar is involved or potentially involved or allegedly involved. उस केस में अगर आप पढ़ोगे वहां पर यही हुआ था. She had undue influence on ICICI Bank, so she was alleged to be making loans and investing in various entities where her relatives, her husband and various other people were involved. तो ये इसलिए आरबीआई ने ऑलरेडी निकाला हुआ था कि भाई ये नहीं कर सकते हो. ओके. सेकंड हमने देख लिया था एनी फर्म इन विच डायरेक्टर्स ऑफ अदर बैंक्स इज इंटरेस्टेड. थर्ड है एनी कंपनी इन विच डायरेक्टर्स ऑफ अदर बैंक्स होल्ड सब्सटैंशियल इंटरेस्ट. कोई कंपनी है जिसमें किसी और बैंक का डायरेक्टर सब्सटैंशियल इंटरेस्ट रखता है, वहां पर भी 25 लाख तक कर सकते हो. उससे ज्यादा करना है तो यू हैव टू गेट परमिशन ऑफ योर बोर्ड ऑफ डायरेक्टर्स. रिलेटिव्स ऑफ डायरेक्टर्स ऑफ द बैंक ऑफ एनी अदर बैंक, डायरेक्टर के रिलेटिव्स हैं उसी बैंक के या उस किसी और बैंक के, तो भी 25 लाख से ज्यादा तो बोर्ड ऑफ डायरेक्टर्स की परमिशन चाहिए. एनी फर्म विद द रिलेटिव इज इंटरेस्टेड एज अ पार्टनर और गारंटर. कोई भी रिलेटिव किसी और फर्म में इन्वॉल्व है, उसमें पार्टनर है, की पर्सनल है, इफ यू वांट टू गिव लोन देयर 25 लाख की लिमिट लगा दी है. ओके. The restrictions as contained in section 20 of BR Act 1949, अभी मैं बताऊंगा, ये section 20 is not important, would apply to grant of loans and advances to spouse and minor or dependent children of the directors. अभी तक हमने family cover नहीं किया था, relatives पे आ गए थे. So you cannot give loans to the spouse of director in your bank also. आपकी बीवी है, आपका हस्बैंड है या आपके बच्चे हैं या डिपेंडेंट हैं, उनको भी आप लोन नहीं दे सकते हो. ओके. इन सर्टन केसेस यू कैन, वो भी अभी डिस्कस कर देंगे. बैंक्स में ग्रांट लोन ऑन बिहाफ ऑफ स्पाउस ऑफ द डायरेक्टर्स, ये आ गया यहाँ पर. यू कैन गिव लोन इफ योर स्पाउस हैज एन इंडिपेंडेंट सोर्स ऑफ इनकम अराइजिंग आउट ऑफ ओन प्रोफेशन और एम्प्लॉयमेंट. तो चंदा कोचर का आर्ग्यूमेंट प्रोबेबली यही होगा कि भाई ये लिखा हुआ है, आई वॉज गिविंग द लोन्स वर गेटिंग अप्रूव्ड फ्रॉम ICICI because my husband had his own independent source of income out of his own employment or profession. He was not dependent on me. So by getting the approval of the board of directors, I was able to give loans to my husband's company also. That must be the argument of Chanda Kochar in the ICICI scam case. Okay. So banks can grant, but this has to be proved or this has to be analyzed beforehand. यहाँ तक clear है? Give me a thumbs up if it's clear. I'll move forward after this. What is the next one? Restrictions on grant of financial assistance to industries which are producing ODS. यहां तक क्लियर है? Any industry which is producing ODS. ODS CFC कोई बता सकता है क्या है? The UPSC aspirants would know. Ozone depleting substances. Any substances which have the potential of depleting ozone. So if there is any company which is producing ozone depleting substances like chlorofluorocarbon, CFCs या फिर और कुछ, तो उसको आप लोन नहीं दे सकते हो. specifically added, I believe, to make sure. I think the protocol that we have for this is Montreal Protocol. Again, a part of your current affairs, your static जी के दोनों में आ जाता है ये. Okay, बैंक्स इनको भी लोन नहीं दे सकता है outrightly disallowed, no financial assistance. Restrictions on advances against sensitive commodities which come under selective credit control. जैसे कि आपका wheat है, खाने की चीजें हैं, शुगर है, ये selective credit control के अंदर आती हैं, because if there is any hoarding, if there is any black marketing, if there is any buying and holding of any of such commodities for speculation purposes, for making money, then it might have impact on the entire economic stability of the country itself. Therefore, RBI said you cannot give loans or advances to any company which might be involved in these selective credit control commodities. Okay, what is the purpose? To prevent speculative holding of essential commodities. RBI said there are specific restrictions. अब RBI ने ये नहीं बोला that you cannot give any loans or advance to any such company. They can, but there are restrictions. You have to follow certain procedure before handing out the loan or advance. Okay, वो procedure हमारे लिए important नहीं है. For us it is important to understand कि restriction है कि नहीं है, banned है, किस type का restriction, that is important for us. यहाँ तक clear है? I'm simplifying all these. एक बार if you have a look at the original regulation, you will realize it's very, very complicated. Restriction on payment of commission to staff members including officers. कोई भी staff member है उनको commission नहीं दे सकते हो if he or she is a regular staff. Very, very important. Bankers को भी नहीं पता होगा ये चीज. If that person working in the bank is not a regular staff, then you can give commission to that member. But if you are a regular staff, then you cannot be give commissions for whatever work you do. You cannot be given share in the profits of the company for whatever you are doing for your job. Okay, ये outrightly banned है, not allowed by a banking company. So banking company cannot employ any person whose remuneration takes the form of commission or share in profits of the company, specifically if you are a regular staff. Okay, do not apply to people who are not regular staff. Restrictions on offering incentives on any banking products. जो भी banking products हैं उसमें आप incentives नहीं दे सकते हो. The maximum incentive that you can give is up to rupees 250. Incentives क्या हो सकते हैं? Prize, lottery, free trip. आप मेरे बैंक में आके अकाउंट खोलोगे, ये स्क्रैच करोगे, फ्री ट्रिप मिलेगी. Not allowed. The maximum benefit that you can give out is up to rupees 250, not more than that. उसके अलावा आप नहीं दे सकते. आप you cannot promote your products by giving freebies to the people. That is in short what the bank is saying here. ठीक है ना? आरबीआई ने ये रेस्ट्रिक्शन लगा के रखा है. नेक्स्ट पे आ जाएं. यहां तक क्लियर है? What about incentives for selling insurance of third parties? वहां पे लूप होल हो सकता है because you're selling insurance not of your bank but of any other company. Okay, so when you're doing that, then you are acting as an agent and not probably acting as a regular staff. Okay, so that is probably a loophole that they've found, and even then it might not be allowed. I don't know if it might not be allowed to give you any incentive for whatever you're selling. आपने let's say मैं HDFC में काम करता हूँ, मुझे बोला SBI लाइफ का इंश्योरेंस प्रोडक्ट बेचो या LIC का इंश्योरेंस प्रोडक्ट बेचो. जब बेचोगे तो तुम्हें इंसेंटिव मिलेगा. ओके, इट माइट नॉट बी अलाउड. दे माइट बी डूइंग इट अंडर द गार्ब ऑफ HDFC not being connected with LIC in any form. Okay, कुछ लोन्स में शार्क फ्यूरी इज आस्किंग अ क्वेश्चन. इन सम लोन्स देयर इज अ restriction and not a ban. In some loans they say up to 25 lakhs you can give. Above 25 lakhs you won't need approval of board of directors. But in some other loans you are not allowed at all. जो हमने अलग अलग डिस्कस किए. ओके, आगे आते हैं. एडवांसेस टू इंडिविजुअल्स अगेंस्ट द सिक्योरिटी ऑफ शेयर्स, डिबेंचर्स और बैंक्स. जो भी इंडिविजुअल्स हैं उनको एडवांसेस नहीं दे सकते अगेंस्ट द सिक्योरिटी ऑफ शेयर्स और डिवेंचर्स और बॉन्ड्स. लोन अगेंस्ट शेयर्स, डिवेंचर्स एंड बॉन्ड्स मे बी ग्रांटेड टू इंडिविजुअल्स टू मीट सम कंटिंजेंसीज. कोई स्पेसिफिक सिचुएशन है कभी आप दे सकते हो, और पर्सनल नीड्स फॉर सब्सक्राइबिंग टू न्यू और राइट्स इशू ऑफ शेयर्स और डिवेंचर्स for purchasing in the secondary market against the security of shares held by the individual. तो लोन आप दो ही कंडीशन में दे सकते हो, टू एन इंडिविजुअल अगेंस्ट द शेयर्स और डिबेंचर्स और बॉन्ड्स, कोई भी कंपनी के हो. द पर्सन कैन कीप कोलेटरल, कीप देम एज कोलेटरल विद यू and can take a loan only when there is a specific contingency involved, or personal need है, or for subscribing to new or rights issue of shares. कोई भी नया शेयर मार्केट में निकला उसको खरीदना है, या फिर राइट्स इशू कोई आया है उसको खरीदना है सेकेंडरी मार्केट में, ओनली देन यू कैन गिव देम मनी. ओके, लोन्स अगेंस्ट सिक्योरिटी ऑफ शेयर्स डिबेंचर्स शुड नॉट एक्सीड, इस केस में द लोन कैन नॉट एक्सीड 10 लाख रुपीज पर इंडिविजुअल इफ दैट शेयर और डिबेंचर इज इन फिजिकल फॉर्म, और अगर डीमैट फॉर्म है तो 20 लाख पर इंडिविजुअल. इट कैन नॉट बी मोर देन दैट. ओके, Lokesh is saying banks giving incentives for insurance of companies which banks have shares in. I have received it. Because these are financial institutions, two financial institutions working together, so there might be a allowed contract by the RBI specifically for this purpose. Otherwise, this specific regulation disallows, ये specific regulation clearly यही बोलती है कि अगर, यहाँ पे आके देखते हैं, BR Act permits payment of commission to any person who is employed only otherwise than as a regular staff. तो आप कमीशन तभी दे सकते हो जब आपका एम्प्लॉयमेंट इज नॉट एज अ रेगुलर स्टाफ. Here what might be happening is the commission that you are receiving is not paid by SBI, is actually paid by, let's say, LIC. So you're getting commission from LIC because you're not a regular staff with LIC. The banks cannot pay commission to its own staff members for any kind of activity जहाँ पे आप कुछ ना कुछ बिजनेस ला रहे हो बैंक का, या फिर रिकवरी ऑफ लोन्स के केस में भी आपको कमीशन नहीं दे सकते हैं. ओके, सो दे माइट बी अ लूप होल और अ गैप हियर, बट एज पर दिस रेगुलेशन, अगर बैंक का कोई बिजनेस है और आप रेगुलर स्टाफ हो, दे कैन नॉट पे यू कमीशन फॉर डूइंग दैट बिजनेस सेपरेटली. ठीक है ना? आई होप दिस इज क्लियर. देखो, थोड़े थोड़े डाउट्स तो आएंगे. दिस इज एन एक्ट. जब भी आप एक्ट ऐसा उठाते हो या रेगुलेशन उठाते हो विच इज कंप्लीटली लीगल इन नेचर, तो थोड़े बहुत गैप्स आते हैं. वो गैप्स धीरे धीरे फिल होते हैं. ओके, ओवर अ पीरियड ऑफ टाइम दे गेट फिल. हम 10 दिन इस एक्ट को बैठ के डिस्कस करते रहेंगे, बहुत सारे डाउट्स हमारे क्लियर होते जाएंगे. ओके, एडवांस टू शेयर एंड स्टॉक ब्रोकर्स और कमोडिटी ब्रोकर्स. कमोडिटी ब्रोकर्स जो हैं या स्टॉक ब्रोकर्स जो हैं, उनको क्या, कैन द बैंक प्रोवाइड लोन टू दीज काइंड ऑफ पीपल? ब्रोकर्स कौन होते हैं? हु डील इन फाइनेंशियल मार्केट. ओके, द शेयर एंड स्टॉक ब्रोकर्स मे बी प्रोवाइडेड ओवरड्राफ्ट फैसिलिटी और लाइन ऑफ क्रेडिट अगेंस्ट द शेयर्स एंड डिबेंचर्स हेल्ड बाय देम एज स्टॉक इन ट्रेड. जो भी उनके पास शेयर्स या डिबेंचर्स हैं, उनके अगेंस्ट आप ओवरड्राफ्ट फैसिलिटी दे सकते हो. यू कैन प्रोवाइड देम मनी. ओके, यू कैन ऑल्सो गिव देम वर्किंग कैपिटल फैसिलिटी, जिससे कि वो अपना धंधा चलाते रहे रेगुलरली. शुड नॉट अंडरटेक फाइनेंसिंग ऑफ बदला ट्रांजैक्शन. ये स्पेसिफिकली बैंड है. कैन एनीवन टेल मी व्हाट इज अ बदला ट्रांजैक्शन? बदला ट्रांजैक्शन क्या होता है? मेरे पास पैसा नहीं है, मैंने लोन लिया, आई एम एन इंडिविजुअल, आई वॉन्ट 10 shares of SBI, but I don't have that money. So I go to another individual and I say, I'm giving you, let's say, these 10 shares cost 1000 rupees. I want to borrow 900 rupees. I have only 100 rupees and I want you to buy these 10 shares. This person goes to another broker, let's say in the market, gives him 1000 rupees, 900 उसके, 100 रुपए मेरे, and buys 10 shares. Okay, these shares stay with this person. After 1 month, I say, okay, now I have money, I can buy these shares from you at I can give you 910 probably. Okay, This person says, okay, fine. He gives me these shares. I know that these shares might increase in value after another 1 month. So I hold them for another 1 month and then I pay and then I sell them off, let's say at 1500. I might also incur a loss and might have to sell them at 500 rupees. So this is a form of बदला ट्रांजेक्शन. ये किया क्यों जाता था? लिक्विडिटी इंक्रीज करने के लिए. बिकॉज आई डोंट हैव 1000 रुपीज बट आई वांट to buy shares worth 1000 rupees. So I involve myself in all this elongated kind of transaction. Banks cannot undertake financing. यहाँ पे आप बैंक से लोन नहीं ले सकते. You cannot take this money from a bank. बैंक आपको पैसा नहीं दे सकता. Okay, disallowed by the RBI. I hope this is clear. Brokers को पैसा दे सकता है ओवरड्राफ्ट फैसिलिटी और लाइन ऑफ क्रेडिट ईदर फॉर वर्किंग कैपिटल और अगेंस्ट शेयर्स हेल्ड बाय देम ऑलरेडी. उनके पास जो शेयर्स हैं उनके अगेंस्ट दे सकता है. बैंक फाइनेंस फॉर मार्केट मेकर. कैन एनीवन टेल मी हु इज अ मार्केट मेकर? लेट्स से आई सेट अप अ कंपनी एंड आई वांट टू गो फॉर एन आईपीओ. मेरे को आईपीओ निकालना है. द आईपीओ इज वर्थ 1000 crore. I don't know if people are going to buy all these shares of 1000 crores or not. So I go to a market maker and I tell him कि यार मुझे पता नहीं है, I'm not very certain, something might go wrong. So can you guarantee that you will buy shares worth 500 crore? The market maker says, okay, fine, no problem. Your share in the market is going to be floating for rupees 10 under IPO. I want it for rupees 9. Only then I will guarantee that I will buy shares worth 500 crore. The company says, fine, मेरी vulnerability कम हो रही है, flexibility बढ़ रही है, okay. तो मैंने market maker purchases the shares of the company worth 500 crore at rupees 9. So can the bank finance this market maker or not? According to this regulation, banks may provide need-based finance to meet the genuine credit requirements of approved market maker, but उसकी conditions हैं. यूनिफॉर्म मार्जिन ऑफ 50% शैल बी अप्लाइड. मतलब जितना भी एडवांस चाहिए उसका 50% आपको एडवांस में देना पड़ेगा, तभी आपको मिलेगा. आपको 500 करोड़ चाहिए लेट्स से, तो 250 करोड़ आपको अपना लाना पड़ेगा. 250 करोड़ मैं आपको एज अ बैंक दे सकता हूं. इसमें से अब मिनिमम कैश मार्जिन ऑफ 25%, जो 50% का मार्जिन है उसमें से 25% हैज टू बी अ कैश मार्जिन, मतलब लिक्विड मार्जिन. ओके, आई होप दिस इज क्लियर. Banks may accept as collateral for the advances scrips other than the scrips in which the market making operation is undertaken. यहाँ पे मतलब बैंक can accept shares as well which are held by this market maker already, but जिस कंपनी में वो शेयर खरीदने जा रहा है अभी उसके शेयर नहीं चलेंगे, किसी और कंपनी के शेयर चलेंगे. Banks should ensure that advances provided are not diverted for investment in shares other than the scrip earmark. ये नहीं कि भाई आईपीओ निकलने वाला था पेटीएम का, आपने जोमेटो के जाके शेयर खरीद लिए, हमसे लोन लिया था पेटीएम के लिए. दैट इज नॉट अलाउड. आई होप दिस इज क्लियर. तो बैंक्स कैन प्रोवाइड फाइनेंस टू मार्केट मेकर्स, बट उसकी कुछ कंडीशंस हैं. बैंक लोन्स फॉर फाइनेंसिंग प्रोमोटर्स कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशन. नाउ दिस इज अ लिटिल टेक्निकल. प्रोमोटर कौन होता है? की पर्सनल हु हैव नॉर्मली ओपनड द कंपनी, हु हैव बीन देयर विद the company from the start. Promoters contribution towards equity capital of a company has to come from its own resources. जो initial capital होती है that cannot be borrowed by the promoter from the bank. That has to come from own resources of the promoter. And the bank should not normally grant advances to take up shares of other companies. Normally allowed नहीं होता है कि बैंक allowed नहीं है ऐसा कि बैंक फाइनेंस करे, बैंक फाइनेंस अ प्रोमोटर टू टेक शेयर्स ऑफ अदर कंपनीज, बट इट डज नॉट मीन कंप्लीटली बैंड है. हाउएवर बैंक्स आर परमिटेड टू एक्सटेंड लोन्स टू कॉर्पोरेट्स अगेंस्ट द शेयर्स हेल्ड बाय देम टू मीट द प्रोमोटर्स कंट्रीब्यूशन टू इक्विटी ऑफ न्यू कंपनीज. मतलब कहीं ना कहीं बैंक्स को डिसअलाउ नहीं किया है, बट इट इज नॉर्मली सेड दैट बैंक शुड नॉट डू इट. दैट प्रोमोटर ऑफ लेट्स से पेटीएम is going and buying a substantial stake in let's say Zomato, and while doing so he is getting financed by let's say HDFC और ICICI और SBI और एनी अदर बैंक। तो बैंक्स को नॉर्मली ये नहीं करना चाहिए। दिस इज व्हाट दिस पर्टिकुलर छोटा सा जो प्रोविजन है ये बोलता है। एडवांसेस अगेंस्ट फिक्स्ड डिपॉजिट रिसीट्स इशूड बाय अदर बैंक्स, बैंक हैज disallowed for giving loans against fixed deposit receipts. There have been instances where fake receipts were issued through which the people started taking loans. So the bank should desist from sanctioning advances against FDRs. Disallowed नहीं है, but it is said the banks should not do it. ठीक है ना, desist करना चाहिए उनको, ये नहीं करना चाहिए। I hope this is clear. नेक्स्ट वाले पे आते हैं। एडवांसेस टू एजेंट्स और इंटरमीडियरीज बेस्ड ऑन कंसिडरेशन ऑफ डिपॉजिट मोबिलाइजेशन। ये क्या बोलता है? बैंक्स शुड डिजिस्ट फ्रॉम बीइंग पार्टी टू अनएथिकल प्रैक्टिसेस ऑफ रेजिंग रिसोर्सेज थ्रू एजेंट्स और इंटरमीडियरीज। मतलब ये बोलता है बैंक्स शुड ट्राई नॉट टू रेज मनी थ्रू एजेंट्स और इंटरमीडियरीज। मैं एक बैंक हूं, rather than going to you and asking you कि मेरे बैंक में डिपॉजिट करो, I instead go to an intermediary and that intermediary goes to you. That intermediary goes to 10 people. He becomes an agent and now I, through that agent, start collecting all that money. That is not allowed. Should desist. Ban नहीं किया है but बोला गया है bank should not do it. Okay. To meet the credit needs of prospective borrowers or from granting loans to intermediaries. ऐसे ही you want a loan, I am a bank, instead of directly giving loan to you, I give a loan to intermediary. I give 100 loans to one intermediary and that intermediary starts disbursing that loan to 100 people. That is not allowed. Okay, वो नहीं कर सकते हैं। That makes complete sense. बहुत लॉजिकल सी बात है, ऐसा अलाउड नहीं होना चाहिए था। फाइनेंस फॉर एंड loans or advances against Indian depository receipts. This can be something like a homework. Let's see. If you don't know it already, you can figure it out. What are American depository receipts or global depository receipts or Indian depository receipts? These are conceptually similar, but कहीं ना कहीं थोड़ा थोड़ा सा difference है. I want you to figure it out. थोड़ा सा दिमाग लगाओगे, you might get something good out of it. Finance for Indian depository receipts allowed नहीं है. No bank can grant any loan for subscription to any Indian depository receipts. I hope this is clear. IDR आपको search करना है. Okay. Okay. So we are left with only 2 now. We are at the end of this. I know थोड़ा लंबा हो गया है because we decided that we'll pick up something difficult. Advances for purchase of gold in lending against gold. अब gold की बात आ जाती है. Direct bank financing for purchase of gold in any form could lead to fueling of demand for gold. मैंने बैंक से लोन लिया और उस लोन से आई एम बाइंग गोल्ड। अगर ऐसा अलाउ हो जाएगा तो व्हाट विल हैपन? द डिमांड फॉर गोल्ड विल स्काईरॉकेट। मैं आराम से बैंक से लोन लूंगा 6-7% पे, जाके लोन गोल्ड खरीद लूंगा। इफ आई नो दैट द गोल्ड प्राइस इज गोइंग टू इंक्रीज शार्पली, स्पेक्यूलेशन होगा, गोल्ड की डिमांड बढ़ेगी। नॉट गुड फॉर द इकोनॉमिक स्टेबिलिटी ऑफ द कंट्री। नो एडवांसेस शुड बी ग्रांटेड बाय बैंक्स फॉर परचेज ऑफ गोल्ड इन एनी फॉर्म इंक्लूडिंग प्राइमरी गोल्ड, गोल्ड बुलियन, गोल्ड ज्वेलरी, गोल्ड कॉइन्स। अलाउड नहीं, आप बैंक से लोन लेके गोल्ड नहीं ले सकते। बैंक्स कैन प्रोवाइड फाइनेंस फॉर जेन्युइन वर्किंग कैपिटल रिक्वायरमेंट्स ऑफ जूलर्स। जूलर्स की जो स्पेसिफिक वर्किंग कैपिटल रिक्वायरमेंट्स है उसके लिए आप ले सकते हो, बट इस तरह से नहीं ले सकते। बैंक शुड नॉट ग्रांट एनी एडवांस अगेंस्ट बुलियन और प्राइमरी गोल्ड। मेरे पास बुलियन पड़ा है, गोल्ड का पूरा वो ब्रिक पड़ी है। आई कैन नॉट गो टू द बैंक एंड से कि मुझे इसके बदले में लोन दे दो। अभी ये बोलता है, इसमें कुछ देयर आर सम एक्सेप्शंस हियर। बैंक्स कैन ग्रांट एडवांस अगेंस्ट स्पेशली मिंटेड गोल्ड कॉइन्स। मेरे पास एक स्पेशली मिंटेड गोल्ड कॉइन है विच हैज बीन सर्टिफाइड बाय द आरबीआई, उसमें भी लिमिट है। आई कैन गेट लोन by keeping that gold coin as a security up to 50 grams per customer. ठीक है ना? Loans sanctioned by banks should not exceed 75% of the value of gold ornaments and jewelry. अब मुथूट फाइनेंस टाइप कंपनीज हैं, वो क्या करती हैं? वो भी यही कर रही है ना, लोन स्पेसिफिकली अलग से आरबीआई से परमिशन लेके दे डील विद ओनली दैट काइंड ऑफ बिजनेस वेयर यू कैन गो गिव देम गोल्ड, उसके बदले वो आपको लोन देती हैं। दैट इज अलाउड, बट if you are a bank, then you can do it only up to 75% of the value of that gold and only for specially minted gold coins for a bank. Muthoot Finance is not a full-fledged bank. उसको ऐसे नहीं बोलेंगे. It's an NBFC. Okay, it's an NBFC. It's a company which is dealing only with gold loans and advances, nothing else. Okay, यहाँ तक clear है क्या क्या allowed है क्या क्या allowed नहीं. Grant of loans for acquisition of Kisan Vikas Patra. What is this? This is a small saving scheme. What people started doing was एक small saving scheme में invest करना है मुझे, but मेरे पास पैसा कुछ नहीं है, तो मैंने बैंक से लोन लिया, let's say 8% पे, और स्मॉल सेविंग स्कीम में इन्वेस्ट कर दिया 10% पे. यहाँ से लोन ले रहा हूँ, नॉट माई ओन मनी, और यहाँ पे उस पैसे को इन्वेस्ट कर रहा हूँ. नाउ दिस हैज बीन डिसअलाउड. अभी ये आप नहीं कर सकते हैं, स्पेसिफिकली आरबीआई ने डाल दिया है. ठीक है ना. आई होप दिस इज क्लियर. तो ये हो गया हमारा आज का पूरा सेशन. वी हैव डिस्कस्ड इन लेंथ, अच्छे से डिटेल में पढ़ा है. इसका जो पीडीएफ है पीपीटी का, वो आपको बहुत जल्दी मिल जाएगा. इट विल बी देयर ऑन द टेलीग्राम चैनल. यू कैन फाइंड द लिंक इन द डिस्क्रिप्शन बिलो. वहाँ से डाउनलोड करो और आराम से जाके उस पीडीएफ को 2-3 बार पढ़ोगे. ये पूरी रेगुलेशन को खोल के आरबीआई की वेबसाइट से भी देख लोगे तो यू कैन कंपेयर बोथ ऑफ देम एंड यू विल अंडरस्टैंड कि इसमें कितना सिंप्लीफाइड फॉर्म में दिया हुआ है. वेरी वेरी रेलिवेंट फॉर योर आरबीआई 2024 एग्जामिनेशन. बहुत हाई चांसेस होते हैं ऐसी एरिया से क्वेश्चंस आने के, और नहीं भी आएगा तो इंटरव्यू में दिस इज गोइंग टू हेल्प यू अ लॉट. इंटरव्यू में रेंज बहुत ज़्यादा है. यू कैन गेट एनीवेयर बिटवीन 5 मार्क्स टू 75 मार्क्स. दैट इज द काइंड ऑफ रेंज दैट यू हैव. तो उसके लिए प्रिपरेशन अभी से करनी होती है. यू हैव टू डेवलप योर पर्सनैलिटी अकॉर्डिंगली. के लिए रीडिंग दीज काइंड ऑफ रेगुलेशंस इज वेरी वेरी यूजफुल. ठीक है. कोई क्वेश्चन होगा, यू कैन पुट इट इन द कमेंट्स सेक्शन बिलो. इफ यू लाइक द सेशन, इंटरेस्टिंग लगा, कुछ नया लगा, डू नॉट फॉरगेट टू लाइक द वीडियो. लाइक करना है और कुछ नहीं करना है, और कॉमेंट करके बताना है हाउ डिड यू फाइंड द सेशन. दैट्स ऑल दैट आई नीड फ्रॉम यू, नथिंग एल्स. आई विल सी यू अगेन ऑन द कमिंग ट्यूसडे hopefully, and we will read something new, something more interesting. Till then, take care, bye bye, keep studying. Jai Hind.